Welcome, everyone. If you could please come take your seat. We're going to get this program going at 7 o'clock. There's the bells to let us know. So please come take your seat and we will get going. The music you've heard was provided by the Andrews Sisters. We also had June Allison as part of our music tonight. Special song, Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, was very important to the family, especially David's family that lived over on Fox Street, because of course during those years they had an apple tree out front. They also had the wives and girlfriends of some of the military people staying at Camp Oaks, Ojai Valley Inn, and so they would sing that song frequently because they were always listening to the radio to find out what was going on with their boyfriends and husbands. So again, thank you for that music. At this time we would like to bring Duji out for the presentation of the colors and the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could rise, please. Please follow me. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Duji. You can please be seated. Again, we do that because David served in our armed forces in the Air Force. In case you haven't seen that crazy picture of him with the mic on and a headgear on, yes, he did pilot helicopters and a few other things. Started out as a fireman. At this time, we would like to bring Steve Mason up front. Steve is the brother to David and is going to share some family thoughts with us. He's taking that long walk to the stage. He's enjoying every moment of it, isn't he, Tim? So we're happy to have the Mason family with us. Steve is here with his wife Linda and his son Tim and his wife Lori. Also Margot is here with her husband Larry, and I think I get everything. Don't my glass. Oh, and then we have David's cousin Tom Miller, who's here with his wife Diane. Oops, there you go, Steve.
Well, you took about half my talk right there. We also have cousin Oline and her husband Terry and Judy Callis and Frankie Hughes. I think she had to leave. She's a cousin too. I was going to just talk for a minute about how we got to Ojai. Back in the early 1920s, my mom's family moved here, and she was with a big family. So they all moved here to Ojai and settled in. Our grandfather had a store at the foot of Denison Grade, which is now a restaurant, and he ran that for a few years until he died. And Mom went to they lived out on the east side of town. Mom went to San Antonio School, which years later, David and Margot and I also went there. Our dad, Pete Mason, when he graduated from high school in the little town in the Ozarks in Arkansas, he hitchhiked and rode a train and did everything he could to get to Ojai because his brother was here. He was a contractor for orange groves where he provided pickers and trucks to haul them to the packing houses. So Dad, chasing a job, came here to work for his brother. And in the meantime, along with that, he got a job, seasonal work with the State Highway Department. Their task was to change the Highway 33 to Maricopa from a dusty cattle trail to a state highway. So Dad worked that for several seasons off and on. And when the state would run out of money, they'd lay him off, and he'd get jobs doing carpenter work. In fact, he was a carpenter during the World War II on Fort Hueneme and Point Mugu naval bases. Well, David was born in July of 1939, and by then, Dad got on permanent with the state. We had so many relatives here in Ojai that, in fact, I was talking to Gary Alstott there a minute ago, talking about all the cousins we had here, and we had so many. I don't think you could walk down the sidewalk of the arcade without running into somebody we were related to. But that, due to attrition, that has changed, and not many of us left here now in Ojai. So David's family was always real important to him, but as we all either died or moved out of Ojai, his family kind of left him. We'd see him on holidays and stuff like that, but not as much as we used to. So this is where you all came in. You became his family, and because of that, it made us, his biological family, feel much better knowing that he had such good, loving people here in Ojai that he could call his family. And we thank you for that. I'd also like to say, Brian, you're a heck of an organizer. You've put on quite a setup here, you, Don, and your staff. And thank you for that from the bottom of our heart. Very, very well. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much, Steve. Very, very happy to have your family here with us, to meet the people that David has told stories about, good stories, especially that speeding ticket, and just inside fun. So it's a joy to have you here. At this time, we have a special number that David first heard many moons ago, requested several times with me that, you know, if he did have some kind of celebration or memorial service, gosh, he'd really like the song sung. So.
Good evening. As Brian said, David heard it at his Aunt Alice's funeral. I think her kids are here today. Hey, welcome.
Beauty all around when there's love at home. There is joy in every sound when there's love at home. Peace and plenty here abide, smiling sweet on every side. Time doth softly, sweetly glide when there's love at home. Love at home. Love at home. Time softly, sweetly glide when there's love at home. Kindly heaven smiles above when there's love at home. Oh, the world is filled with love when there's love at home. Sweeter sings the brooklet by, brighter beams the azure sky. Oh, there's one who smiles on high when there's a love at home. Love at home. Love at home. Oh, there's one who smiles on high when there's love at
I've got to tell you, probably like Tom and Diane, we've heard that song since I was little. Heard it sung by lots of people. And let me tell you, Smitty, I'm glad the Mormon Tabernacle Choir couldn't show up because I'd take you guys over that any day. That arrangement was amazing. Amazing. Thank you.
One more. Okay, we're trying to get out of the way.
I just kept sitting back there going, wow, that's amazing. Next up is a high school classmate of David's. I'm not going to steal her thunder. Following her, Omar Barasa will speak with us, share a story with us about he and Thatcher School. We're pleased that Omar heard about the program and immediately made plans to come here from Washington State. And that was even before I asked him to speak. So then we have a video. Hope you enjoyed taking pictures up there with David and the Los Floristas Ball model. Hope to see those popping up on Facebook. And so we'll see a video on that on David's days. He actually did 12 headdresses for the Floristas Balls. And following that video, Pamela Allison Powell will not be here tonight. However, she sent her brother. So we're looking forward to hearing what Rick has to share with us tonight. Have no idea what the price of that move was, but anyway, we'll go from there. Cynthia.
Good evening. I'm going to be reading mine, and it's going to be a little sketchy since I left my glasses and my purse down with Larry, so bear with me here. David and I met in kindergarten at the Women's Club, where we shared painting on easels, graham crackers and milk, and we took naps together on little rugs, little thin rugs on the floor. He was born on Bastille Day, 1939, a sure sign that he would bring a certain cachet into our valley, and he loved Hollywood. In the 1940s, Hollywood was our social media. Our window into the world outside the valley was the Saturday afternoon matinee. A cowboy movie always kicked off the afternoon. The second feature came from a mixed bag that occasionally coughed up a glamorous 1947 musical. In one of those, David met and fell in love with the hotter-than-hot red-headed bombshell Rita Hayworth. You can catch her in Gilda on Turner Classic Movies. In the fourth grade, David left Ojai Elementary when the Masons moved to the East End, where David attended San Antonio School. His graduate class from the sixth grade numbered 5. Among the 5 was Frida Lee, who, after Nordhoff and Cal, went on to make celebrated documentaries on a wide spectrum of Americans. In 1995, she took home the Oscar for Best Documentary. And that documentary is called Maya Lin, and it's about the gal that designed the Vietnam Memorial. I recommend it highly. David's pride in Frida led him to relish telling people, well, you know, 20% of my graduating class won Academy Awards. He carried the torch for Rita Hayworth into high school when he got a job as a busboy at the Ojai Valley Inn, where Hollywood hung out on weekends. Imagine his excitement when he came to work one broiling summer day to learn Rita was in residence. As he went about setting the tables for dinner, who dragged herself off the sweltering golf course and through the dining room, sans makeup, sweaty and disheveled in the heat, but Rita herself. David was devastated by her bedraggled appearance. He went home for lunch, reporting his broken heart to his parents. Hauling himself back to for the dinner shift, he went through the motions of refilling glasses, etc., when his glamour girl reappeared, sweeping into the dining room in a form-fitting, bespangled gown, her long auburn hair perfectly coiffed, dazzling him once again. But Rita was only the beginning. His Hollywood friends included Maxine Andrews of the Andrews Sisters, Diane Ladd, Donald O'Connor, Anthony Hopkins, Sharon Gless, Loretta Young, Larry Hagman, Bill Paxton, and countless others. But most of you know, Larry Hagman once insisted on sending a limo for David so he would attend Larry's birthday in Los Angeles. David had sent regrets, claiming, I can never find a place to park down there. But most of you know, his most beloved Hollywood pal was June Allison, who so enjoyed hanging out with David, she'd actually come down to the village florist and help him make flower arrangements. Right now, I'm sure he's squiring June to some party, tearing up the dance floor with Rita, or celebrating his new Shangri-La with Larry and Bill Paxton. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the life of Mr. Ojai, David Mason. My name is Omar Barraza. I'm a native of the Ojai. I was born here in 1972. My family came to this valley to pick oranges in the fields, and my grandparents raised 11 children in Ojai, and I'm extremely proud to have been brought up in this fantastic nest, this town, this village. I remember being a kid and going to the village florist, and I've talked to a number of people that are in my age cohort, in their 40s, that grew up in this town, and we all agree that going to the village florist at Christmas was more exciting and more brilliant than even our first trip to Disneyland. It really was. It was magical. And we came from very humble beginnings, and going into the village florist and seeing this glamour and this incredible celebration of Christmas and community was a memory that I will carry with me the rest of my days. My mother, God rest her soul, was a little crazy. We didn't have a lot of money, but that never stopped her. I don't know if any of you knew my mother, Pat Barraza, or Pat Owen. She worked at the Ojai Valley News. And she had a plan. And that plan was that I was going to the Thatcher School come hell or high water. And I didn't really go along with the program for quite a long time. It was really started out as her dream more than mine. But over the years, she convinced me that this was my future, that this was the dream that I would aspire to, that no matter what was happening, I needed to study and be a good boy and do my homework and not give Mr. Olson a lot of lip. And I did everything she asked of me. And she determined that I was going to the Thatcher School. And I went for my interview a little skeptical. You know I'm smart. My parents surrounded us with books and education. They read to us. They demanded that we read. And I knew I could get in, and I knew that I deserved the opportunity, that I'd earned the opportunity, but we didn't have the money. This was 1986. It was something like $16,000 a year for a day student to attend the Thatcher School. And this was my dream, and I go to the campus and I go to my interview skeptical, like, I don't know about this. I don't think we can make this happen. And when I got in, there were people that laughed at my mom. They laughed at her because we didn't have the money. And I knew one thing about my mother, and that was that she would stop at nothing to get me and my sister what we needed to thrive. And I will go to my grave not knowing how or why, but she worked on David Mason. And she sold this dream to him, and he bought into the dream so much that he paid for me to go to Thatcher. And I know that if I hadn't gone to Thatcher, I probably would have made it. But I think about what would it have meant to me at that age to have had my dreams crushed and eviscerated. And I think back and I wonder, why did David do this for me? Why? It probably wasn't my mother's womanly wiles. And I knew him, he knew my family, but we weren't particularly close. And over the years, I've wondered, why? Why did he do this? And I would ask him, and he wouldn't give me an answer. And it occurred to me, after he passed away, that he did this out of charity, out of kindness, out of generosity, out of love. And that, to me, I think, is one of the most important things that I would ask you to take away from your friendship with David, from your knowledge of David, and that was that charity works. David had no obligation to help me at all. He asked nothing of me. He didn't sit me down and say, "Kid, you better not mess this up." Not once did he admonish me, threaten me, pressure me. He never, ever put me in that position. He just gave me my dream. He gave me this incredible opportunity out of the kindness of his heart. That is who David Mason was and will always be for me. And as I've asked that question over the course of my life, why me? I've also realized that it's my duty and my luxury, my pleasure, my new dream to help other people. I'm an attorney, I live in Seattle, and I'm extremely blessed to have a good standard of living and to be able to help vulnerable people achieve their dreams and to obtain permanent residency in the United States. And I think back to what David did for me, and I smile because David, through me, lives through me and is not only changing the course of my life, but changing the course of the lives of the people that I touch and that I help and that I interact with. And sometimes my partner tells me, you're too nice. Don't give people payment plans. You need to be more greedy. And I think, well, what would that have meant for me if David had had that attitude? If he had been hard or unwilling to help me, just help me. And I feel so blessed, so truly incredibly blessed to have not only gone to Thatcher, but to have had this incredible role model of a human being, David Mason, model for me what it means to give to others, to engage in charity, not philanthropy. Philanthropy is kind of conditional, like, if you're a good boy, I'll help you. He didn't ask anything other than just, here you go. And he gave me this incredible gift. And he was the catalyst, really, truly a catalyst for me to realize my dreams. Thank you, David. Thank you for teaching me that giving unconditional love pays dividends across generations. Thank you for teaching us, David, about community, about compassion, about Christian brotherly love and helping the least among us. Because at the end of the day, all we really have is each other. I challenge you, if you love David, to please, in your own life, practice charity, practice kindness, practice generosity, because you too have the power to change the course of people's lives. Thank you, and thank you, David. May he rest in peace.
Association, which was the LA Market, and every year they had an open house, and each seller booth, whatever you call it, in the flower market had a designer in their booth. Well, this just happened to be the Southern California Floral Association booth itself, which would have been the main booth. So they asked me if I would be the designer for that booth that year. So I did. And these two very attractive ladies came by and said, we're from Las Floristas Ball and wondered if you'd be interested in being one of our florists. And I had always watched it on television, I just thought it was the grandest thing. And so I said, sure. So anyway, I didn't hear from them for a couple of years. I just kind of thought, well, I guess they lost interest. And so then one day I got a call that they had an opening in the centerpiece competition. And would I be interested in doing that year? And so it was Hooray for Hollywood was the theme that year. And it had to depict something in Hollywood. Now it was, I think, about 4 feet long, and it was probably 2 feet high and 2 feet wide. And I decided to do Showboat. And I went to the library and went everywhere looking for a picture of Riverboat, with a big wheel in the back, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And so I thought, so I called MGM. About that. And I get this gal on the phone, and she's really nice, and I tell her what it is I'm doing and what a trouble I'm having, and did they have any stills or any photographs or anything from Showboat that I could have to copy for this centerpiece. And she said, let me put you in charge of the guy in the layout department. And so I got him, and he said, no, we don't keep anything like that. But he said, the first Showboat was 1932. And he said, I have all of the original pictures that we used to make that Showboat. And he said, I'd be glad to send them to you. And so he did. I got this big packet from MGM with all these pictures. Well, anyway, we carved it all out of styrofoam, and then it had to be all petaled. We pasted each petal on one at a time, everything. Wow. Everything on it had to be covered in flowers or petals, and smokestacks and everything. And so then it was at the Century Plaza that year, and so I took it down there, and got it in, got it, whatever, and in the judging, I won the President's Trophy. And it wasn't sweepstakes, but it was the next one. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me there if I would be interested in doing a headdress next year. And I said, sure. So I think I did 12 of them. And a lot of them were fun, some of them were not so much fun. And I loved taking my friends.
Thank you very much.
Did you go with them, Lori?
Your friend loved to go with you.
Oh, nice.
I'd always buy a table. And one year it was 50th anniversary, 60th, something like that. And so they gave us a list of all of the headdress themes from the past 50 years. And the first year was 1939, and of course the year I was born, and it was Ferdinand the Bull goes to the headdress ball, and one of the girls said, can you imagine anybody doing anything with that? That's ridiculous. So I said, well, I want Ferdinand then. So Ferdinand the Bull, and we were on Merv Griffin's show, and I just loved it. He sat up there, it was all big Spanish arches with lots of drapey stuff and wrought iron gates. It looked like she was walking through these gates, and up here on the top arch, maybe 3 arches smaller. Up on the top was this big purple bull, cute as could be. Of course he had a daisy in his mouth, but he had his legs crossed, and this one was on a spring. So when she walked, his foot would go up and down, and had more fun with that one.
They were magnificent, really. Mm-hmm. They don't have that anymore, do they?
They've gone to dresses. What happened? Some of the charities were spending too much of the money that was donated to them for bookkeepers and those kind of people, and the charities weren't getting what the government felt they should. So the government stepped in and decided that you could only spend so much of the money you took in on raising the money. The rest of it the rest of the percent had to go. And we had held it at the Beverly Hilton. And even though it was set up for television, all the cameras and things just plugged into the walls. It cost, at that time, it cost $40,000 to move the cameras over there and film our show, even though the last year we were on, our rating was the same as the Rose Parade.
Wow.
And anyway, the 40,000, the government wouldn't let them spend that much because they were only making 200,000 or whatever it was. And so they had to cut off the teleguise part, and then it started falling off.
Yeah.
Once it wasn't televised anymore.
And your model was Mrs. Hilton, wasn't she?
She's the one that gave me my trophy.
Oh.
It was Paris Hilton's grandmother. I always wanted to make it her mother, but it was her grandmother. She was married to Baron Hilton. We used to go to Baron Hilton's house all the time for dinner parties.
Okay, I think I fell asleep when I was cropping that segment, so we're going to cut them off right there because that story's coming up later in the program. This time we'd like to bring out Rick Powell to share some info with us, some story.
Good evening. How are you? My name is Richard Powell, and my late mother, June Allison, my sister, Pam, and I considered David Mason a very dear, dear close friend of the family ever since we got to know him in 1977. Later, my wife Linda and my son would get to know him as a member of the family too. We celebrated nearly every birthday and holiday together, plus other events throughout the year. When my son was born, he sent my son his first teddy bear. And then when our grandson was born in June, David sent him his first teddy bear. So I guess the bears stay in the family. My mother, June Allison, and my stepfather, David Asher, walked into the village florist in '77 and were enchanted. David quickly became a frequent guest of their home on Foothill, and my mom soon began to call him my other David. Soon after, David asked Mom to appear in some TV commercials to promote the wonderland that David created in his shop. She was thrilled to do it, and doing the commercial for many years, it ran on Channel 7. During this time, David traveled with my mom, going on cruises and special entertainment events throughout the world. As you can imagine, he loved every moment of that. You know, my mom's friends like Esther Williams, Gloria DeHaven, Ann Miller, Sid Charisse, and other legends of MGM considered David to be a good friend also. He would hang on every word, on every one of their words, but had them in gales of laughter with his stories as well. Can't you just hear his laugh? One of our favorite stories took place in the year the Academy honored the ladies of MGM, and they performed a musical number. Mom asked David to accompany her to the event. While he was sitting there in a nearly empty auditorium, a man moved next to David, and introduced himself. David explained that he was there with June Allison, and they chatted for a while. The man got up to leave and said to David, "Nice meeting you, Mr. Allison." David laughed, and he never corrected him. And another story I remember when the Ojai fire was going on, and my mom and dad were down at some school in a field, and David's up at the house throwing stuff in the pool and taking pictures and paintings, putting them in the van. And then he's driving down the hill thinking, oh God, they're going to stop me, look in my van, and think I'm a thief. Well, and be arrested, but that never happened. But David would often tell his stories of his friendships with Loretta Young and his daughter Judy and her daughter Judy Lewis, who lived in Ojai for years. David also maintained friendships with people like Sharon Glass from Cagney and Lacey fame, and she even asked me to keep in touch the past few months of David's health as it declined. Who could forget the friendships that David had with Larry Hagman? David seemed to attend every party at his home, and Mr. Hagman would rely on him for history, resources, information about Ojai. Although my mother and Mr. Hagman never met, they would send messages through David. And after my mother and stepfather passed away, David lived in the house in Ojai for several years. It seemed as if he hung up more Hollywood memorabilia than Mom ever did. And that was a lot of stuff. David knew more about my mom's films than my sister and I. He could recite dialogue, knew all the actors and the years the films were made, and collected lobby cards of each picture. He became the historian of my family as well as Ojai. Although my father, Dick Powell, passed away many years ago, David knew everything about his career also. And when we sold the house on Foothill, David was one of the first people to meet the new owners, Sharon and Stuart Sampson. They live half their year in Ojai and half the year in Colorado. They cared about David so much that they flew in here to be here today. We love you, David, and we'll miss you dearly. Godspeed, Mr. Ojai. We love you, and we will always cherish the family memories with you. He was a good man. Thank you.
When we were putting the program together, whoa, everybody disappeared. When we were putting the program together, there were two things we were trying to attempt. One was to front load the speakers so that the darkness would fall. We've tested the daylight 4 times before we came out here with our giant speaker. Another thing I want you to do, the picture that you see up there came to us late in our search for a black and white picture. Judy Mercer, who's our collections, came up with it one day. We loved it. We took it to our committee looking for what picture to put in our program. Unanimously selected that. I called and talked to the artist's mom, in fact, and she gave us permission to use it. So in 2010, as you may have seen in the slide, that was done by Graham Dunn, who's a professional photographer. When I talked to his mom the other day to get permission, Graham was in New York. So we love that. We love how touching that is, how radiant and how warm that is. And that's why we keep using it as our space on our videos and our speakers. So I'm just going to leave you with this next little snippet as we come up on this video. So answer this question. How did David's becoming a florist start with an engagement? We'll let you find out.
I was engaged to a girl, and she wanted a flower shop, and so I had made all these arrangements for her to have a flower shop. And one night I went to the Firebird, and when I came out, everything I'd ever given her in my life was in the front seat of the car. So, but by that time I had the refrigerator and all that stuff in my driveway. So my aunt said, well, why don't you go ahead and open it and I'll come and help you. And I said, but I've never been in a flower shop. And she said, well, can't we learn? And I said, I guess. So I drove down every book I had on flower arranging. And we opened there on Signal Street next to what is now just Quick Stop. my aunt's husband owned the filling station next door, so made it handy.
What year was that?
66.
I was here then. My dad was a botany major. Could have helped you.
Yeah.
They didn't move here till the 80s, so. No, 70s.
Well, I had a time because everybody would say, "Oh, I'd love to watch your work away." Yeah, I was busy turning pages. See what it was I was supposed to do.
So what year did you move over to the arcade?
70. About 77, I think. The property sold, and where I was, and sold to Chase Brothers. And the one Chase boy wanted to put it in an antique shop there, so they gave us 30-day notice. And so the store where I was for sale, but of course I didn't have the money to buy the woman out, so I had gone to the bank to see if I could borrow enough to buy her out. And they turned me down. And so then I'd gone to Security Pacific, and they turned me down. So I was walking through the alley, and a lady that worked for Libbey came out, and she said, "Oh, we're so excited that you're going to be moving in the arcade." And I said, "Well, no, I can't get a loan to buy the lady out, so I guess I'm just going to close." She said, "Oh, well, you meet me out at Ojai State Bank," she said, "at 3 o'clock. I said, "Well, it won't do any good." I said, "They'll turn me down too." And she said, "Well, you just meet me out there anyway." Well, I knew the lady and I knew who she was, but we weren't really well acquainted. I knew she worked for Libbey, and I knew her son had been killed, and I felt sorry for her. And so anyway, I met her out there, and she walked up to the manager, and she said, "Mr. Mason needs $17,000, and this is my passbook. I'm going to put it up for the Bible."
Oh, how nice.
Thanks, Barbara. But you know, Christmas isn't really just for kids. This year marks the 10th consecutive year that Dave Mason's Village Florist in Ojai's Arcade has assembled some of the most elaborate Christmas trees for people of all ages. Each tree is meticulously decorated in a specific theme, and each year the themes are different. This year's selections range from modes of transportation to the Walt Disney tree, featuring Mickey Mouse honoring Donald Duck's birthday. They started out with well over 4,000 ornaments in November, ranging in price from 25 cents to $60. And if this year is anything like the previous 10, most, if not all of them, will be sold. In fact, Dave tells us that a few years ago, some tourists bought not only a tree, but a completely decorated tree, and had it shipped all the way to Dallas. Each year, a new set of animated Christmas figures is added, even though they're not for sale. Another addition this year is the Christmas train that circles the store suspended from the ceiling. Add handmade Christmas wreaths, and it's easy to see why people come from all over to find unique presents and decorations to make Christmas past Christmas present.
I'd like to start by saying thank you to everyone who put this celebration of life together. As we all know, Dave would have certainly been embarrassed about all this fuss. But this is not for the one that we lost, this is for the ones that remain, as we remember Dave and start the healing process of the absence in our lives. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Chester Perry. If you've been in the valley for many years, you will remember Jerry and Barbara Clausen, owners of Clausen Funeral Home. I had the honor to manage that business for 20 years prior to its closing. That is how David and I crossed paths. It only stands to reason that a florist and a funeral director would become fast friends. He made many meaningful arrangements for many families in the Ojai Valley, making their loss a little less painful with the beauty of his floral arrangements. David, as you know, owned Village Florist and the Arcade, which was a landmark in itself. I can still see him sitting back there in that little cubby in the back of his shop he called his workspace. It always amazed me how he could put out as many beautiful arrangements as he did in such a cramped work area, especially during Valentine's Day. But as a lot of you were recipients of his gifts, you know that he did. His shop was full of memorabilia and photo from Hollywood and Ojai. Everything from June Allison to Tarzan, and all actors both great and small. I would drop by from time to time, even after Clausen's closed, just to talk. He was such a wealth of information about Ojai and Old Hollywood in its heyday. There wasn't much he didn't know about both subjects. It is just so amazing how quick time flies. It's been 29 years since I first met Dave, yet it seems like just yesterday. David, as you know, was so aware of the passage of time. I think that's why he was so passionate about keeping the history of both Old Hollywood and Ojai alive. If we don't remember where we have been, we really can't gauge where we are going. I will miss my friend, as I am sure you all will. God bless you all, and may the peace that passes all understanding be with you. Thank
When did you become the go-to man to find out about anything in Ojai, but also a lot of things about the stars and the movie stars?
Well, the history part started when Bill Mallory's mother died.
Wonderful woman.
And he cleaned out her house, and he used my dumpster, because he had the Western Union office right behind the flower shop, and I had a big dumpster. And so he would, every day he'd bring a load of his mother's stuff down there and throw them in the dumpster. And Nosy Rosie got such a kick out of going out there and looking through the stuff, because the letters were all addressed to Nordoff, California, and there's lots of old postcards in there that were old Ojai, and her diaries, which were all from the teens. And so he'd put it in, and then after he'd leave, I'd take it out. And I just got interested in the history of Ojai, and it wasn't until Bob Brown started, every time I'd see him, I'd say, "Oh, stop by the flower shop, I've got something for the museum." So it got to where he would come every day on his way to the post office and say, "Got anything for us today?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I do," and I'd give him whatever it was. And so then, when I got shanghaied on the board of the museum, then I started spending time researching it. Plus, Mother remembered a lot, and she used to tell a lot of interesting stories about things. And I thought just the other day, one that I wish I had thought of when she was alive, was because she lived here for 5 years during Mr. Libbey's period.
Oh, wow.
He died about 5 years after she moved here. You know, she might not have known him personally, of course, but she might have seen him. Might have been kind of interesting to, you know. I've thought of that so often because the arcade and the Oaks Hotel was brand new the year they moved here, so it would have been kind of interesting to have heard more about that period.
Somebody left the lights on the car. I think it's you, Mavis, the Volkswagen.
Oh, Dan, not again. You'll ruin that car.
Who bestowed the fitting name Mr. Ojai upon you, David Mason?
Nobody.
Huh? Did you take that on yourself?
Well, I think where it came from was I had to change my email address for some reason. And I was trying to think of something to put on there. And it had to be so many characters, you know, or something. And so I thought, oh shoot, I never thinking anybody would ever see it. Because that was many years ago that, you know, I didn't even know anybody had email. And, but I had to have it because I got orders came in on the computer. And so I just typed it in there and it accepted it. Well, then as email became more popular, people would get my email address and they'd start writing, Dear Mr. Ojai. In fact, Linda Gray and Mary Crosby both called me Mr. Ojai. And they write to me.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Brian, for this opportunity to share in David's day. To use a phrase from back in the day, David Mason, what a trip. He was a special guy. In the 24 or so years that I knew him, he never ceased to amaze. David and I began our relationship when I bought the Ojai Valley News in '92, and he was writing a column, Memories of the Ojai Valley, and he was writing both for the Ventura Star as well as for the News, predominantly for the Star. And he and I became friends, and in '93 he became predominantly our boy and no longer was appearing very often in the Star itself. Over the ensuing years, I think we all know that his columns continually provided unique historical insights into the home he loved so much. In short, he wrote the kind of stuff we learned from and never tired of reading. However, as we also know, he was much more fun, genuine fun, as a gossip columnist. And in that role, he was without peer, I think we'll all agree. Knowing everyone and loving to be included, David wrote about the Valley's social life, and according to the managing editor at the time, I think he's on his way up, Lenny Roberts, who you'll probably all remember. Some of it was even made up. So I did some investigation in the morgues at the museum as well as at the Ojai Valley News, and I came up with two tidbits that I found especially enthralling, and maybe not made up. So this is David writing in his column. I'm sure glad the elections are over. My mail has dropped by almost 20 pounds. Through it all, I did enjoy recalling back to 1986 when Duke Tully, former publisher of the Ojai Valley News, asked me to have a small party at my house to introduce his friend, John McCain. To the movers and shakers of the Ojai Valley, John McCain was preparing to run for the U.S. Senate from the state of Arizona and was in Ojai on a short visit. It was a beautiful Ojai day. About 30 people showed up to talk to this very interesting young man. And this one is, the valley's soaked with rain, but the good news is that the spring social season is just beginning. Who better to kick off a fun-filled season, none other than the ever-vivacious Patricia Dwight Weinberger. Weinberger, in celebration of Valentine's Day, greeted her guests in a striking red flowing Versace gown. Guests were treated to a splendid table of hors d'oeuvres spread around a large container of fresh shrimp. The dining table was a vision in red, with gift-wrapped party favors from the beautiful Primavera Gallery. Dinner remained in the red theme, with guests enjoying half lobsters prepared by one of our host's favorite chefs, Gus, from Seafresh Seafood in Ojai. And this last thought from David: to everyone in this beautiful valley, thank you for giving me such enjoyable times to write about. You are all especially important to me. Thank you.
Weren't you responsible too, David, for the memorial rock downtown?
Well, no, I wasn't responsible for it. They had a wooden one. What they did was they put up a big wooden sign there, and it had all the boys that were in the service on it. And then as they were killed, their names were painted in gold. And so when the war ended, they decided they wanted a memorial for just the boys, that didn't come on. And so the Lions Club came up with this idea. And so it was done and opened on Memorial Day in '51. And my uncle was down there. My grandmother wanted to take some flowers, and she didn't have anything but little pink Cecil Brunner roses, so she made a little coffee can full. We walked up there, and it was raining, and put her flowers. And then they had a little service, but we all stood over under the arcade out of the rain. And, so every year, her and I would walk up there with little flowers. And, so every year we put flowers on the rock.
By the various
and
wars or
I continued it
conflicts.
on every year. And so then, well, bombing of the pergola left an impression,
True.
one that I had to figure out how we were going to change that. And so after the city took it down, I had come to work early that morning as they were bulldozing it. And I was determined right then that it was going to go back out. But in '88, took it down 72 to '88, I thought I had enough support to have it rebuilt. So I got on the agenda at the city council meeting, and Jim Lobel was on there, and he wouldn't let me talk. I was on the agenda, but every time I opened my mouth, he would say, "We're not going to discuss this." And so finally I said, "Mr. Lobel, you can't stay on this council forever." And the day that the newspaper said Jim Lobel resigns, I called Joan Kemper. She was new to town, had no idea what I was talking about. But I called her and I said, I've got a project that I need your help with. She said, what is it? And I said, well, it's hard to explain. I'll have to show you pictures of it. So she said, I'll be right there. Now, I didn't know her very well. I just knew that she was kind of a go-getter.
Mm-hmm.
And
had money.
yeah, so she came right down and I showed her the pictures and she said, oh my God, this is fabulous. She said, we need an architect. So she called David Burry and she told David, she said, we need you to volunteer your services. And now we need publicity, so we'll have to get Ren Adams on here too. And so that's how it started.
I'm Joan Kemper. When I moved here in the late 80s, I didn't know one soul, but I met Mr. David Mason while I was strolling down the arcade. And that's all I needed to do, because all of a sudden I had a lifelong friend, and I also was introduced to everybody. And the first thing David said to me, he said, you're new here. You just heard him on the movie. You need to join the music festival. They need help over there. So I thought, well, I guess I better do that. He told me to do that. So I joined the music festival. And the day I joined the music festival, David was on the board, but paradoxically, he resigned the day I went. So I thought, wow, I thought that was my friend. And David got a lot of laughs out of that story through the years. She joined and I quit. But anyway, so about the second year I was at the music festival working, the women's committee for years had run the thrift store at the lower level of the festival building. And they made money to support the festival. And they came to me about the second year I was there and said, we're tired of all the junk, we're tired of dirty clothes, we're tired of sorting, pricing, we're gonna quit. I said, oh. And they were making about $12,000 in the thrift shop a year for the festival. So this was not good. So I said, well, let's think of some other fundraiser. So a lot of brains went into this, and the idea came up that maybe they'd do a home tour. So I thought, home tour? And I still was pretty strange around here. And so I ran across the street to the flower shop and I said to David, do you think if we did a home tour that there's enough architecturally designed houses and historically interesting houses that people would come to see and pay for a tour? Oh, he said, absolutely, absolutely. And then he began listing off the houses. So he was amazing. For the first 7 years, the Holiday Home Tour was born then. It was about 1994. And the Holiday Home Tour was born then. It's now in its 21st year. And about the first 8 years of this, David Mason found all the houses. He would go to people and say, you know, homeowners, he said, this house is good, wonderful, you need to be on the home tour. Somebody from the music festival will call you. And he laid the groundwork for that. He was so interested in the history and the architectural integrity of the properties and having other people come and see what Ojai is really all about. And then now, the next thing he said to me after we finished that was, of course, he came over and he said, I have another little project for you, the pergola. And he told that story. So we started on the pergola. And I will say, if it hadn't been for David, as the film showed you, 2 times since it was demolished, 2 attempts have been made to rebuild it. It never worked until Mr. Mason got the impetus and the push behind it. We had a great committee, Paul Blatz, David Burry, Laura Crary, Dale Hansen, Neva Williams, Tom Brostrom, Craig Walker, let's see who else, have I forgotten anybody? I don't think so. And Mr. Blatz and Mr. Burry were both on the city council at the time, but the city put no money in building the pergola. It was all raised by private funds from individual donors and businesses. It was a great success, was dedicated in 1999. And so that's the big project that I worked on with David. And we were friends and got into lots of trouble after that.
Stick around, right?
Yeah, Randy's coming.
Yes, okay. So John's going to stick around for just a minute. We have a special guest that's going to come out. With Ren Adams going to bring him out. We'd like Lenny Roberts to come over. He has some information to share with us.
Thank you. When Kay and I moved to Ojai 40 years ago, the first person we met was Lurie, and that was because she sold us our house. The second person we met shortly thereafter was David, and we became friends for 40 years. David was supportive of me when, like that little clip we saw of the Christmas store. That was a cable show that my wife and I produced for 26 years called Ojai 84, and those of you who are around may remember it, and it's online now still. And David was very supportive, not only as a sponsor, but he supplied us guests and just knowledge. After that, my 21-year tenure at the Ojai Valley News as reporter and then managing editor, David was there. Whatever I needed, David was supportive of that too. So that's pretty much all I want to say about that. I mean, we could go on forever. For 40 years, I have a lot of stories to share, but this isn't this isn't the place. I met with Joan Kemper at David's memorial at the museum. Joan and Craig Walker and a few others, we talked about memorializing David in a commemorative plaque dedicated to David for his, being Mr. Ojai and his work primarily at the pergola. So we came up with a plaque that Joan and I are going to present to the City Council on Tuesday night, and that plaque will memorialize David's contribution as really spearheading the pergola project. And Ren is going to read the inscription on that plaque, and we obviously need to raise some funds to do that. So if anybody is interested in helping, you can contact me either tonight or at some future point. But I did speak with Johnny Johnston when I got the idea to do this, and he seemed to be very supportive of it. So this is not an agenda item on Tuesday night. Just we're going to go and present this plaque idea to the city, and I don't think that there would be any problem in doing this. But Ren is going to read the inscription on the plaque.
This is just for the benefit of those who maybe didn't have time to see the plaque on their way in. We remember David Mason, whose vision of rebuilding this pergola became a reality upon its dedication July 4th, 1999. A lifelong resident of our community, Mr. Ojai was a United States Air Force veteran, philanthropist, and tireless volunteer at the Visitor Center and the Ojai Valley Museum, where he also served on the Board of Trustees. David was an Ojai Living Treasure, Grand Marshal of the 1996 Independence Day Parade, and served as Charter Chair of the Ojai Cultural Heritage Board. Those who knew him, and many did, will forever be grateful to have had his friendship. And as Lenny mentioned, we suspect that there are a number of people here tonight who might want to participate in the plaque, and I will be at the exit with some information and also with Lenny's cell phone. So if you're interested in joining us, just give him a call and he'll facilitate that. Thank you.
Joan just reminded me that I may not have made it clear where this plaque is going to go. It'll be on the park side of the pergola, very close to the fountain and the crosswalk. There's a nice space where we can put this. I used this picture on the plaque, and Colleen McDougall, who many of us know, did a similar plaque for me for Eddie Callender at Soul Park. And of course, her dad did the plaque in Libbey Park for Mr. Libbey. And it's wonderful in as much as it's not just a flat thing. The face, the whole head and everything is dimensional. It's raised in bronze. So I used this picture not knowing what the origin was. Now that I know, I will hope to get Mr. Dunn's permission to use it. That's it. Thank you.
Well, it was really a highlight. It was Frank Sinatra. I thought it was his birthday party, but it was just, I looked at the program the other day, and it was just to honor him. And June and David were going, so they asked me if I would go and be Gloria DeHaven's date. And so I did, and because walking, we came down the elevator in the Beverly Hilton, and the whole lobby of the Beverly Hilton was set up with those stands for spectators.
Oh, uh-huh.
On both sides. I never saw anything like it. And of course they're all screaming at all the celebrities. And it was the day that Tony Perkins had died.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of when we turned the corner, here was nothing but TV cameras and all that, and they were all asking celebrities about Tony Perkins. And so when we got inside, the girls were socializing and what have you, and I wasn't doing anything. And it was Ann Miller. I thought it was Catherine Grayson, but it was Ann Miller.
Oh, okay.
Who came and got me, and she said, "David, I'm here with Jimmy Doolittle," and she said, "I need to socialize." And she said, "I don't want to leave him sitting here by himself." She said, "Would you mind keeping him company?" I said, "I can't think of anything I'd be more honored to do." And about that time, a fellow rolled up Ginger Rogers, and she was in a wheelchair. And she had to go down 3 steps, and so she just had this one guy pushing her. So I got up and picked up half the wheelchair, and he picked up the other half, took it down the steps for her, and then I sat back down with Jimmy, and we sat and talked for probably 45 minutes. And it was really special. I don't know why, we didn't talk about the war or anything, we just talked about people, and he asked me who somebody was, that came by the table or something. And,
So fun to be able to watch David answering these questions and to hear from him. Back in 2012, as part of the museum, we started doing oral histories. I would go out, I would ask people, okay, can we do an oral history with you? And one of their first questions was, have you done one with David? No. Why? You should be interviewing David Mason. We've asked David Mason multiple times. There was one time when David even agreed. He told me Sunday I came over after church, okay, I've been finagled into doing an oral history interview. I'll do it. That night at 6 o'clock he called me, he said, changed my mind. So then one day he told us, this was in June, just a year ago, he said, okay, I'll do your oral history, but I want Joyce Robinson and Laree Bjornstedt in the room with me asking the questions. So I called Laree as soon as I turned the corner. I said, Laree, we need to interview David. I don't think she knew how desperate I was to get her down. I was like, can we do it in the next hour? Don't want him to change his mind again. So I'm so happy that we were able to bring snippets of that interview that Joyce and Laree and David and I did that afternoon, and to be able to share it with you tonight. Just a couple things, a couple concluding remarks. I talked with Laree yesterday. One thing we didn't cover in going through areas to cover was that on Sundays, when he had the Village Florist going on Sundays, the shop was closed. And he was talked into going over there to the real estate office, Ojai Realty, that Laree was running, and just, sit there and keep the shop open. Well, he met lots of friends, and he met lots of celebrity, and he had lots of success. One of the fun things was that he had kind of a sidekick there on Sundays. That would be Bob Emhart. You may know him, should know him. Someone came in one day and said, I'm looking to buy some realty. Oh, by the way, you look really familiar. Do I know you? Ever been to Ojai before? No? Probably not. So it's just fun. He worked with fabulous people like Laree. He also worked with Carla Bart, who many of us have either known or heard about, and who we lost way too soon. Years came along. He eventually closed the Village Florist. I can remember I was on the board at that time, and this rumor went through the walls of our museum. David Mason's closing the Village Florist. Well, that's sad. Yeah, but he's coming to the museum. Well, that's good. And so because of David's generosity, he was there every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning on the morning session. And on Saturdays and Sundays at the Visitor Center, you could come. You could ask David, so where's the best place to eat in town? I knew the answer, but I'm trying not to be partial here. But it was always fun listening to him. We had a joke, or I had a joke. If they didn't know who Mr. Ojai was, they were definitely out of town. But we enjoyed David being with us. The museum was David's very special place. You can hear how all the way back to the days of Bob Brown, he was involved in contributing to the museum. One of the things he enjoyed was to have that, to have it available to each of you. And we've done all we can to recover, keep, store, exhibit, share David's memories. Coming up in January, there will be a new exhibit. It will start with David and go into the rotating gallery. It will be about the architecture of Ojai. I think Joan just mentioned that in asking David, are there any architecturally significant houses in Ojai? I bet she knows that answer now. So again, if you'd like, we encourage you, I encourage you, treasurer of the museum, to make a donation in David's name to the endowment fund. He would appreciate that. We all would appreciate that. David tells the story of one Easter he was in the flower shop. Some gentleman walked in. He was in a uniform. He came in. He wanted to buy an Easter lily for his aunt. And he was in a uniform. Okay? And so he bought an Easter lily for his aunt. He made a comment, wow, you have lots of Easter lilies. David said, I do, and I'll be working really late tonight. So the gentleman left with his Easter lily, and David, did he go back to work? No, he was standing at the front window waiting to see if he'd come back. And that gentleman did come back later that day, wanted another Easter lily. Turned out it was for his aunt's mother down in Ventura. Well, that gentleman, suit and all, or uniform and all, walked into the store. David grabbed him, took him into the back room, threw him down on his lap and said, let's talk. David said, I didn't know if he was married and I didn't know if he had kids. I just knew he was mine. And he and Al Schaefer worked together for 27 wonderful years. Al died, passed away in 1987. I was looking at pictures of a tree that they did in Al's honor that was out at Sewell Park. Lots of interesting stories about David and Al. They were very different. Al liked to cook. I was pointing out to David's cousin and his wife yesterday. We took a quick tour. We went over to David's apartment there on El Paseo, peeked through the windows. I said, there's something that David never used. And his cousin's wife said, that's a kitchen. I said, exactly. So, but they were happy and loved their time together and did a lot of entertaining out at that house on Thatcher. I'd just like to offer some thank yous, some special thank yous. There's so many. I'd like to thank Julie Williams and Deborah Moe. They were David's neighbors for years and years and years. I credit them with keeping David around for us to enjoy a few years longer. So thank you to Julie and to Moe. I'd like to thank Dawn Teeting. Dawn is persistent. She is relentless. Sometimes David liked that. Sometimes David definitely did not like it. Would you please just stop bothering me, okay? No, you can't check the oxygen in my finger anymore today. 6 times in the last 3 minutes is enough. So, David was taken care of from when he got out of the hospital in December by the Livingston Visiting Nurses Hospice Group. I want to call special attention to, there are many people who helped him, but special attention to Carol McCormick. She's here in our valley, who was his, the one that took care of him, one that focused on him, the one that we called first. Gal called Carrie. Carrie was, or David was kind of a modest person. Well, he was a very modest person, but you know, not so modest in front of that cute male nurse in the ER or in the ICU over at Ojai Valley Hospital here in Ojai. Loved that nurse. He also enjoyed Carrie. Carrie was the one who came and gave him baths and shaved his face and shampooed his hair. And David loved being taken care of by Carrie. So thank you, Carrie, for all of that. And Kathy was a special volunteer. The last full night before David passed away, Kathy volunteered to come with her dog and sit with David all night long. And she stayed awake. I know I came at 1 and 4 to give him this medicine, so thank you. And to the many of you that have come tonight, thank you very much. The stories you've shared, the emails that you've submitted to our committee. What's the staff think, Steve? Anyway, thank you. So at this time, we are going to have Duji come and retire the colors, or he said collars, and then we will have one small closing. Duji. Thank you, Duji. Thank you for honoring David's service in the Air Force for all those years. One last thing, I was talking to Larry just yesterday, and she made a remark to me, not knowing how this program was planned to end. She said, you know, David wasn't a wealthy man in terms of monetary success, but David was wealthy by the friends he had. I said to her, Larry, just pay attention for the ending. So Ray, if you could play that video clip for us, I'd appreciate it.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town. Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
So we tried to arrange those bells up in the tower to ring right at 8:30, but it didn't work. You did hear him at 8 o'clock, you'll hear him at 9 o'clock, 8:30, not so much. Guess they take a nap in between. But you know when you hear those tower bells ringing, or do I hear any other bells coming? Well, that was the closest thing we could come up with at the moment. Thank you, Mike. So when you hear a bell, just remember it's our friend David receiving his wings. So if you'll join me at this time, I would like to end this program with a standing ovation for our dear friend David. So please stand and join me in a round of applause for our friend David Mason.
Seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll see you in that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is through, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you, I'll be seeing you.
Thank you all very much for being here tonight. We're going to send you out with one last song. Kind of reminds me of what Omar Barraza sang. It comes from our another icon, Louis Armstrong. So enjoy that as you leave. Please go home safely. And keep good thoughts about our friend who we love, who we honor, who we remember, David Miller Mason. Thank you and good night.
I see trees of green,